Good afternoon. We'll actually keep talking about defense and security, except in this case, it's going to be food security. The commodity market and agriculture are in an interesting position right now. Agriculture is an industry which, through the telecom industry, is very close to my heart. But the fact is, when agriculture stops working, we, after a while, start dying, which is a bigger problem than when your internet goes down. And actually, this year, people are some of them going to do that because the commodity sector has been disrupted. It's not a normal year. Two of the biggest grain producers in the world are at war. The Russian army is going specifically after Ukrainian cropland and grain storage facilities. So things are, and we also, on top of that, of course, have climate change and drought. So it's an interesting time of year. And with us, we have three of the companies that monitor that space with some very cutting-edge technology, including new types of sensors that we will discuss today. So with us from your left is Don Osborne, CEO of EarthDaily Analytics, Max Gulde, CEO of Constellar, and joining us virtually is Peter Fossell, CEO of Hydrosat. I'm going to give each of you the customary 1 minute to pitch. Don. And your slides, when you have them, should be up while you talk.
Great. Well, thanks for having me here today. I really appreciate the opportunity. If I was to go back to the first Euroconsult conference that was held here in, I think, '97, and I concede I was actually here, and I asked the question about what's the biggest challenge facing the world today, I think I would have got a number of answers, but they were probably regional in nature, whether it was regional strife, regional war. We wouldn't be talking about the problems we are today, which, you know, if you get the hot list, I guess it's food security, as we're here to talk to about today, water optimization, and climate change, for example. These are truly global problems. And we believe that the world needs a global change detection system to address that using Earth observation. And there really isn't anything in place today to do that. We at EarthDaily are developing that system. Just to give you some highlights, we have 4 pillars of what we think is a very differentiated value proposition. The first is quality, so it's data quality. If you're doing broadband, broad area change detection, then you need quality of data. And this has to feed an AI or machine learning algorithm because you're looking at across a large expanse of territory or even globally. And you can't afford to feed it with garbage, and you can't afford to have hundreds of people qualify the data that goes into that engine. So it's all about the quality of the pixel, which is the pixel size, the pixel color, the pixel geolocation. We start, obviously, with a sophisticated sensor on board the satellite, but we complement that with some pretty interesting and innovative techniques around things like calibration, where we cross-calibrate between our own satellites, which is a series of 10 satellites rotating around the Earth, and we cross-calibrate with other systems like Sentinel. Second to that is coverage. We look for 100% coverage of the Earth's Earth's surface every day. We do this a little differently. Most EO systems are point and shoot. We actually use a push broom sensor where we sweep up the Earth's surface. So we don't have to choose what to look at. We're looking at everything. Third, we look for temporal consistency. So it's not just about revisit. We do that every day, but we also do it at the same point from space and same time every day. So again, back to that quality pixel theme. And finally, if you're getting that kind of data through the system, as you can imagine, you have to figure out a different way to process it. We have invested a huge amount of money in putting together a processing system, which is very different. That all feeds our ag analytics business, which today uses disparate sources, but we're looking forward to amping that up when EarthDaily comes.
Okay, we'll drill into some of that later on. Max, Constellar.
Okay, first of all, thanks for having us here. I completely concur that we just, with the Ukraine and Russia, it's just a glimpse of what might happen, what will happen actually, if we're looking into the future with climate change. And we are past, let's say, the point where just a bit of better engineering every day can solve this problem. So we need rapid innovation, and I think the solution will come from space. However, we're not a space company. Constellar is a company which will build a, let's say, global atlas based on physical and chemical reality of our planet, and it's going to be used in different fields. And the first layer we're looking at this is actually water for agriculture. So we are, I would say, an agriculture company, because what we do is, and again here, it's all about the solution in the end, right? So what we want to do is we want to create a solution, and it shouldn't matter that it's from space. Yes, space is cool and glamorous and so on, but it doesn't matter in the end, because in the end, what's important is the outcome on the ground. And so we're an agriculture company which happen to have assets in space. Taking first images in March. You can see this on the right-hand side. Obviously, this is just a very coarse, it's not a comparison in that sense, right? But we're very happy to have operational hardware in space, and things are looking quite well. And we're also looking towards providing global solutions on a daily basis in the near future.
And Peter, we can see you. I trust you can hear us. Tell us about Hydrosat.
Yes, thank you very much, and thank you for having me here virtually. I apologize, my flight was canceled. I agree with everything that we've talked about already at the start of this discussion. And for us, food security in agriculture, predominantly driven by water stress, is one of the most critical challenges of our time that we're going to face as a society, as humanity. Over the next 100 years. And this is a problem that's not going away. We've looked at some of the most volatile, weather events over the past, several years, and that pace of change and pace of volatility impacting our food supply is not going away. And so we started Hydrosat, really as an information products company. And that's what we are, and that's true to our core. We're a data fusion company. We do focus on multispectral infrared and thermal infrared in particular, but really to solve problems in water stress in agriculture. And what you're looking at there on the screen is one of our core products, which is a daily global land surface temperature data set for agriculture. And so today we're doing that with a fusion approach that we've developed internally as a company. And we're providing that information globally, daily, anywhere where we don't have cloud cover. On top of that, we are building crop analytics. Food security for us is really crop production forecasting. And we're in the second year of having our own crop models covering 7 crop types right now in the US, which we're going to be expanding around the world as well. But we have a challenge, which is we don't have enough data in the thermal infrared in order to feed these products. And so starting next year, we'll be launching a satellite constellation that's 7 bands of multispectral visible and near infrared, as well as 2 bands of thermal infrared, so that we're also providing daily global land surface temperature measurements to feed this data set, so that we can better predict crop yields, so that we can provide irrigation recommendations to better manage what we view as the most critical resource that we have on this planet, which is water.
Okay, great way to finish. Thank you. So the floor is open, by the way. Don't wait until the end. If you have questions or you want to be patched into the discussion, I'll be watching the room and we will do just that. While you think of your questions, let me give you a variant of the panel's last question a little bit. What has anything changed in the products that you are asked for, in the market's interest, also in what you're trying to do in the past 6 to 12 months because of all the upheaval?
I can take that first, if that's okay. Just chime in. Yeah. So for us, what is interesting to see is in the, let's say, with the customers in agriculture, there's no need, and these customers are not farmers, by the way, right? So they're large input providers, they're seed providers. There's no need to convince them of the necessity of that, we spoke with them. I can't name them, but they basically said, look, we all believe that in 3 years from now, water is going to be a bigger issue than carbon is today. And I totally believe that, right? And what they tell us basically, okay, we are preparing for water wars. We're preparing for massive water shortage. We are putting a massive amount of money into, let's say, getting more drought resistant, be it corn or be it wheat or something else. So they're all preparing for that. They all know that this is coming. So this is a very good position to be in as a company, but also obviously ultimately it's a very worrying position because my feeling is that the global awareness of, as Peter, you said it, water, the most precious resource on our planet, and it's not there yet.
We knew this was coming for about 30 years. The interest now maybe is from higher levels in governments and industry, and maybe not just in the traditional agro industry.
Just to complement what was being said, I guess I'll give an example. We've really seen our business go from, say, field to region to now global. We've been servicing Ukraine for a number of years. Obviously, with the war going on there, they're a large exporter into the world market, as well as Russia. That's about 30% of the wheat market, which is now kind of hung up for one reason or another. We are we're actually giving our services for free into the Ukraine to help farmers farm. But that yield is going to be, well, all the best intents is going to be cut back, obviously, this year. So there's interest in what the yield will be in Ukraine, but we're also dealing with organizations which are looking at what's happening in Morocco. Morocco is suffering from a drought, as we all know, which is hurting their own yield, but they happen to be a large importer of, they usually get 30% of their grain from Ukraine, which they can no longer get. So we're starting to see this cascade effect, and people are now asking us, can you start to predict the global yield of grain at any one time across all the fields of this world? And I think those are the questions that are going to be asked in the future, and that's one of the reasons we're developing.
Let me inject a twist in this, and then Peter, of course, we're eager to hear your answer. We've seen particular disruption for some minor crops that had not been as closely monitored by the traders and the industry. Mustard is the one that's most visible in the supermarkets in France.
It's terrible for France and for Germany.
Oh, don't tell me, but thank God I had stockpiles. Fertilizers also. So now you have to use it more carefully because the potash came from Ukraine. The satellite systems are well placed to find those needles in the haystack, right? But are you developing new products, or is there anything new that you have to develop for all this? Algorithms or signatures?
So, I mean, mustard's a great example. It's interesting because I come from Canada. Canada's the largest exporter of mustard seed in the world, and France, of course, is the largest user of mustard, as we all know. So, we had a drought in Canada, the yields were cut back. There's no amount of digital agriculture which is going to change that. The fact the drought was there's no water, the crop dies. But let's look up the food chain a little bit. Let's look at the users. They would have had early prediction, which would have said they're not going to get the yields they're expecting, and would have allowed them to look out using digital agriculture for other areas of the world that they could stimulate, such as Argentina, to grow more seeds more quickly to offset that shortcoming. You could take it up a level and say governments that have policy, and I'm sure in France we have a lot of policy. I'm sure there's something to do with Dijon mustard here. They could have stimulated the use of ketchup with French fries instead of Dijon. But
Peter, don't feel alone.
Yes, no, I agree with everything that Don said, and I would just stress the point that these systems are inherently global, and so. Whether it's the droughts in Canada that have led to the shortage of mustard seeds, or whether it's concerns around wheat getting out of Ukraine, we've certainly had more and more interest over the last really six months, but even going back longer than that, to look at these food supply issues. And I think what Don said is absolutely on point, which is. A food pressure in one area impacts everywhere, and so we're looking at drought in Africa that's impacting more regional food supply there, knowing that there's less wheat that's going to be able to reach world markets. And so I think being able to have that global perspective and being able to look at all different markets across the globe, because they are inherently interconnected, is tremendously important.
Yeah, maybe just to chime in here, Peter, I think what you can say is that basically there are two ways of operating, right? So one is the operational, the production side, right? And that's, as you said, you just know it early, you can optimize the amount of water or the water productivity, so amount of crop per drop. That's the one side. But in the end, if you don't have any water, there's nothing to optimize, right? Your crop is still going to die. So that's it. So this is also, which means that that's only one use of the data or one use of the solutions or the analytics. The other use is the market side. And so we need market-based instruments, and that's for the insurance sector, for example, parametric insurance or index insurance is going to be important, to avoid basically having farmers completely lose their livelihood, starting from scratch and then going again. So it's these two sides, and we need both, right? We can't just have one side, because if there's no mustard, that's fine.
Okay, enough about the mustard maybe,
Yes.
but if there's no water at all, the crop dies, but it's not always as drastic. You mainly you don't sell to the farmers, right? There may be exceptions, but you sell to the seed companies, among other things. Those are spending vast amounts on developing drought-resistant varieties. Do they see your data as a way for them to decide which variety they should deploy at this part of the world at that time? You sell also a big customer segment for you is crop insurance, crop financing. Now suddenly they have better visibility at what their risk exposure might be in a given field. So how do they use your data?
It's, if I may, okay, yeah. Giving you one very specific example, I can't tell which company it is, but you can guess. So looking at a large corn/maize provider, and they're using this for two things. First of all, they know if I have a certain amount of, let's say, I can give you a very concrete example. On average, if you have 1 day of 1 degree more than 30 degrees, maize yield is going to lost by 1% at the end of the
Think of that when you look at your thermometer.
Yeah, exactly. So which means that 5 days at 35 degrees centigrade in 1 year gives you 25% yield loss. That is big, right? This is really big. And that's obviously it's an average, right? So what you can do is if you have this data, you can predict and steer your sourcing, right? So you know exactly, as I said, okay, let's say this region is not going to have a lot of corn, so I need to go to another region. I need to start counter. And the earlier you know that, the better. And current technology from satellites is usually a damage-based assessment. And we need to move from this damage-based assessment to a symptom-based assessment. So instead of looking at a 100-meter distance to someone saying, okay, he might have a rash, actually taking the temperature. That's, I think, the concept behind it, and that's massively useful in saving water. So 40 to 60% is what some of our customers in irrigation estimate, but it's a 2-week time advantage, at least what other estimate in terms of the sourcing, and its reduction of the risk in the crop models by around 50%.
Peter, you're nodding yes. Might
Yes.
you have a slightly different twist on this?
So I would agree with what Max said, and I particularly this point about early indications, right? All of our companies on this panel today are have an IR capability, and for us with land surface temperature with thermal infrared, that really is providing a leading indicator for crop stress, for crop moisture stress in particular. And so where most of the industry for the last decades has been reactive. We have stress conditions that are manifesting themselves in an NDVI indicator. That's all a lagging indicator, right? But with the thermal data that we're focused on, and also what Max has been talking about, that gives us the ability to provide a leading indicator for when problems are starting to develop, and enough in time for managers to actually do something about it, whether it's changing their sourcing, whether it's hedging differently, or if it's in a grower context, whether it's actually changing the amount of irrigation provided to the field. And so that's really what we're trying to do, is to get ahead of problems before they develop or before they get worse.
Don, as part of your response, on the insurance and financing issue, do you know how much money has been, how much financing has been provided because you gave of those data you gave to?
I can tell you that Earth observation is starting to fundamentally change some of the mechanisms for things like financing and insurance.
There's a big leveraging effect.
I'll give you an example. In South America, if you look at financing of farms, traditionally it's based on the capex or the land. So you borrow against the capital employed or the land itself. And as people have reached out and start to rent territory, et cetera, to farm, that's not available to leverage. So there's got to be another way. And what they're doing is they're financing against the potential of the crop yield. So we're actually working with insurance companies in South America who are prepared to lend to growers against the future crop yield. And of course, what they want to do is they manage their own risk as they go along. They want to make sure that the crop they're financing was the crop that was planted. They want to know it's where it was planted. They want to understand as it's going through its yield cycle that they're not overly exposed, and the insurance is following accordingly. So that's a whole new branch that we're helping start, and that's collective Earth observation.
Max and Peter, since you're part of a growing infrared mafia in the agro market, and thermal infrared, I think maybe we should spend a couple of minutes drilling into those new products, because they're not necessarily familiar. One thing I've been told, for instance, is you don't measure temperature. You measure infrared reflectance, and then in between there's modeling. Then you need high accuracy. So does it come from another of those black box AIs? How confident are we at the resolution that we're talking about, that we understand the phenomenologies? Speaking of which, let me quote quickly from an article here on agricultural remote sensing. It lists the processes that are involved in what we see of plants from a satellite. It's not just the picture. To interpret the picture, you need to understand the radiative, conductive, and convective exchanges, rainfall, irrigation, balance between runoff and infiltration, drainage, soil evaporation, vegetation, transpiration, plant photosynthesis and respiration, litter decomposition, respiration, nitrogen balance. It's not just an image. And then that's right. You also measure the reflectance of the soil under the plant. So now, how do you untangle this big ball of thread?
So it's entirely right. It's super complex, right? The first thing what we do, we actually measure the brightness temperature, if you like, right? So we measure the multiplication of the emissivity and the kinetic temperature, which means that inherently we need to know what kind of emissivity I have, so what kind of material I'm actually looking at. And this actually brings, so the emissivity uncertainty alone brings a relatively high uncertainty into the overall product. And that's the reason, and yes, it is complex, right? So I think there's an ESA 10 out, which is developing a processor for this LST, this land surface temperature, for the next 7 years.
It's complex. Is there any research that still has to be done? We still have 5 minutes. Any R&D element in this, or are you completely operational?
No, well, it has been known since the mid-70s, since the 90s. There's good algorithms out there which give good predictions. So that's the advantage, because the data in principle is out there. It's just not out there at the required frequency and coverage. So in principle, we are confident. Looking at Peter's nodding. We're confident that this is working. However, obviously with more data and more availability of this data, these models will become better. But it's absolutely instrumental and that's maybe something to nail down here, is that in thermal, in agriculture, it's not about resolution anymore, right? So we're not trying to be the sub-meter resolution thermal guys. I wouldn't say that it doesn't matter at all, but it's not very important. What's really important is the radiometry. So how reliable can you do measurements over a series of time? And that is where the magic lies, I would say. But please, over to you, Peter.
Yeah, so I absolutely agree, Max. And there's 2 points I'd like to make. First, in terms of the complexity and that article that you're reading off, I mean, that's why we view ourselves as a data fusion business, right? Because there is no single silver bullet data set. that you're going to get from satellite. That's going to solve all of your problems for you. So it really is fusing multiple sources of data together for the outcome that you want. The other point I'd make, which Max alluded to, is that thermal infrared imaging from satellite is not new. I mean, there's a body of research that's gone back 30 years or more using satellite thermal measurements for agriculture specifically. Of course, there's the Landsat program, there's the Sentinel program, there's EcoStress and VEERS and others that have been providing thermal satellite data, but it's not at the temporal resolution or the spatial resolution taken together that's necessary to unlock a lot of the value that Max and I are looking to unlock, and that's where we come in from a commercial perspective. But the other thing I'd say is this data is also not new commercially. We just hired a new VP of Sales and Business Development who comes from a company that has spent the last 15 years taking thermal imagery from airplanes, flying over crop fields and selling that data to agribusiness customers. So it's thermal remote sensing data, just from a different altitude. So in terms of maturity and R&D needed, this is a really well-known use case and well-known data set. It's just a question of being able to provide it at a disruptive time frequency. That's the real gap that we're looking to fill.
How are you going to sell those data? Is there anything, just the usual sales channels and distribution channels, or is this even more an ingredient that comes into analytical services? Or anything specific to that particular market, or does it sell like any other image product?
Yeah. Okay. So I do believe that there's going to be a phase the next 5 to 6 years where it might still be interesting to actually also sell data. But it's what we see with the customers is that in the end, they don't want temperature, right? They even don't want evapotranspiration. In the end, they want to know, okay, what's happening? What's the stress on the field? So there's a large potential to develop into that. And I'm super happy that all of our hardware requirements will be slightly alleviated towards the end of the decade when large missions are coming online, which will provide this data at a fantastic quality, possibly better than we can do with small platforms. And then we can fill the gap until there. But also this gives us time, and that's important, an urgent thing. It gives us time to develop these solutions that when it is really available at scale, and it's also changed price, obviously, when it's available at scale, to come in with the solutions, with the really analytic solutions we need. So in the end, no, it's not going to be about imagery. It's going to be about solutions.
Before you go, remember, I did open the floor, and this is your last chance to...
You have to answer questions about radiometry, though.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
I was going to say, we see the value in analytics in the same way. In fact, our business is a little different. We started in the analytics, and we drove it backwards into what the requirements for the space system needed to be to solve that problem. So vertical integration for us is key to being successful in the market.
Pieter, anything to add on the distribution?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we too are a analytics first company. And so for us, we are really creating information products focused on irrigation and focused on crop yield that we then provide directly to customers. So that's one path, one level. But the other level, there is a data business, and there is a more traditional pathway to sell the data either directly to government. We have currently some revenue generating contracts where we're providing our fusion data to some government customers in the US. And there's also, the traditional reseller and channel partner approach. We've signed reseller agreements in the Middle East, in North America, and in India to channel our data as well. So I think it's it's a combination of both creating a value-added information product inside our company, but also channeling the data, through more traditional remote sensing sales channels.
Okay, we're out of time. So but we heard analytics first companies, big leverage effect on one of the most critical industries in the world. What else? The tech is proven, even though it's often packaged as a novelty. And on the mustard, no hope really. If you have some, don't eat all of it now. You may want to show it to your grandchildren later on. Thank you very much. We now transition to the coffee break, actually sponsored by EarthDaily Analytics. Thank you for the coffee. Thank you for your attention.